Alrighty. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another edition of the Adorable Anarchist World. And I got an interesting guest for us today, Mr. Mark Corske, hope I just pronounced that right, who recently came out with a good documentary called The Engines of Domination. But before I get to that, I'm just going to take a little bit of a look down the alley of the market at some of our sponsors. For one, go check out Distance Arts. If you like that little art in the background there, and you'd like to get it for your dorm room or something, please go check us out. That is the backbone of this whole operation, and it's the only thing pumping money into this podcast at the moment. But also go check out the Pontiac Tribune. Going to have some stuff up on there around November 14th or the 16th, I believe, so that'll be a good start for some good articles for me to release. But also, thirdly, please come out and check out Win Privacy, which is now the new version of Privacy Shield out there, which they should have an Indiegogo up soon for that. And, you know, I'm not even going to take any time with the ads. I just want to get straight into this interview. Now then, I don't know if anyone out there has seen this documentary, Engines of Domination, but, you know, or I don't know where to start with this. How about this? Humans, we naturally aim to find meaning in life. And, you know, it's amazing how some of us, where we find meaning is through domination. And this film does a great job at outlining the domination and what he has dubbed the current human emergency. The tone is beautiful of the film, and the soundtrack is absolutely amazing. And one thing that I really did like about this film, too, was that it was good at shining a light on what is a really bad part of humanity, but at the same time, it remained hopeful with it all. Like, there was still that sense of hope, like this wasn't the end. And without any further ado, I'm just going to let Mark take this away. Mark, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you come from, what really got you into this?
It's quite a long story. First, my last name is pronounced Corske, not Corske.
Corske.
I began thinking about the world and the trouble it was in way back in my teens. Partly inspired by a little detour I took into the works of Ayn Rand when I was a teenager. It was my first encounter with philosophy. I didn't know there was such a thing. I grew up in the 50s in the United States during the McCarthy hearings. Communists were taking over the world. You had to keep smiling and act happy like everything was okay, while, you know, people were being deported and hauled in front of these hearings for thought crimes, basically. It was a bizarre atmosphere and a highly patriotic atmosphere. So finding Rand, just for a while, I was a self-indoctrinated Randroid. I thought she had the truth. And then some friends rescued me from that, and I really began thinking for myself. It soon became clear to me. By now, it was the early 70s. The Indochina wars were raging in Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and it became clear to me that the problem was political power itself. These huge military states, the United States, the Soviet Union, that could cause so much damage, and did it without the consent of their people. So I became an anarchist well before I was 20, kept thinking about the world, had a kind of spotty academic career, dropped out of school once, went back in my mid-20s, fell in love with mathematics and physics, pursued a degree in theoretical physics, 3 years at the graduate level, and then ran into a big boondoggle with the authorities and dropped out again. But by then, I decided that I really had to apply all the training I had and all thinking I'd done the years before. I had to really try to figure political power out for myself in an original way. None of the stuff I read made sense, and I'm kind of a do-it-yourself person for various reasons. So I guess it was the early 1980s, I began really trying to figure this thing out on my own. That took a long time. Meanwhile, my profession was teaching mathematics. I was a private mathematics teacher at the college level until I moved here to Taos, New Mexico, where I got a wonderful job at a beautiful little, I guess you'd call it a hippie high school, Chamisa Mesa High School. wasn't hippie at all. It was a college prep school. Most of our kids, 9 out of 10 of them, went on to college. So that's my professional background. By the early 1990s, I'd begun to get my theory together, using physics partly, looking at political power as a device that manipulates human energy to the advantage of the rulers. So by just about 10 years ago, I started writing the book Engines of Domination. Finally got it published 2.5 years ago. And then the documentary came about when, purely by chance, the brilliant filmmaker Justin Jazuski happened upon my book at Amazon, got in touch with me about making a documentary, and slaved at it. Unbelievably hard work for 9 months. And now, in just 1 hour, someone can get the essence of my ideas, the two biggest ideas in the theory. There's a whole lot more in the book, but if the book disappeared, the essence of what I want people to understand about my theory is in that documentary.
Yeah, and I think that's really cool. I personally went through the Ayn Rand phase as well. I think everyone has at one point in their awakening for most. But I really do like that this documentary exists, because I'll be honest, and I probably wouldn't have stumbled upon your book if it wasn't for Justin messaging me one day and telling me about this documentary coming out. If anything, I think this is really good because, as much as I would like to point people to books and just say, like, go check this out, a lot of the times they won't. If you point them to a movie or something, they're a lot more likely to check it out and then go explore after that. But anyways, like, one thing that really did stick with me was, you were just saying too, was about human nature, and I find it absolutely amazing how you'll be talking with people, and it's amazing how people are so willingly able to believe that man is an evil creature. I was on a walk with about 2 other people a few months back, and we had this long discussion about whether man was good or evil. And I simply found it amazed that, like, these people were so convinced that man was a malevolent creature, that we were here to really destroy the earth. Do you want to build off of that at all?
I think it's the most important. It's the most important question. The world is in terrible trouble. There's no question about that. There are people who deny it, but their motivations are obvious and their evidence is nil. Between the threat of nuclear war, which is enormous and constant, at least from accidental nuclear war, destruction of habitat, the problems of urban crowding and the possibilities of pandemics, the problems of the degradation of our food supply and the toxicity of the environment, even the problem of how the global corporate culture has wrapped people up in a way of life that's tragically far from what really makes life worth living and what makes people bloom in their humanity. The world's in terrible trouble, so it's very easy to look at that in terms of us being the perpetrator, us as a species being violent and destructive, even insane, to cause so much trouble. After all, we're the species that's doing it. The house cats aren't doing it, the mice and the ants aren't doing it, it's us, right? Well, I think there's 2 aspects to that. One is it's an easy, glib explanation. Yes, human beings are doing it. But the other is there's a long tradition of blaming humanity for problems. Way back in the 17th century, Thomas Hobbes depicted human beings as basically brutal and self-serving. And according to Hobbes, if it weren't for the state, we would all be in a state of constant warfare against each other. Once you've got the state, which terrifies us all into being good, then maybe we have a chance of being civilized. This became more of an issue with the nuclear bomb, because there was a kind of destruction that made all previous kinds of destruction look trivial. What kind of creature would create the atomic bomb? What kind of creature would have been caught up in a horrible war that seemed to make creating the atomic bomb necessary? And you just watch one of those go off and know what it does. In Hiroshima, possibly 80 to 100,000 people were killed in a matter of a minute or so. it used to take. I mean, before the atomic bomb, you could kill 200,000 people in a night of firebombing, like the United States firebombing of Tokyo. But before probably before the 19th century, certainly before the 18th, a major war wouldn't kill 200,000 people. So here's this horrific violence, and it's coming not out of brawls and quarrels, but out of great scientific genius, like the people at Los Alamos who created the bomb. It seemed like it was natural to blame us, and many people rose to the occasion. Robert Artery in African Genesis, the territorial imperative. We're born killers. We're out to get what we can and kill anybody who stands in our way. So we take the blame. But that's only one side of the issue. The other side is a very deep psychological dynamic. Victims of abuse tend to take the blame for their abuse. In my view, we're all victims of abuse by political power. We're treated like cattle. We're treated as implements that those in power manipulate to maintain their advantage over us and their privilege and authority. We're made victims of war. So it's much more psychologically comforting to take the blame for these horrible things that some people are doing than to focus the blame where it belongs. And then the final aspect of it is that gets the perpetrators off the hook by saying we are violent and destructive. We commit atrocities, war atrocities. We are destroying the environment. The people who actually are doing it, which is only a very tiny, tiny fraction of the percentage, of the fraction of the species, they get off the hook for being in charge of the processes that are causing destruction. It's a very dangerous way of thinking, partly because if we're to blame, if it really is human nature to cause this much destruction, we're doomed, and partly because it gets us off the hook. If it's our nature, there's nothing we can do about it. We might as well just sit back and have fun and enjoy what we can till we're out of here and let it come down around our heads.
Yeah, I would very much agree with a great majority of that. Like, that is really what it has come down to, that governments have convinced us that, oh, if we're not here, you'll kill each other or you'll kill yourself. And it really is amazing how they have become the farmers and we have become the cattle. But, you know, I hear you kind of ragging on, like, how should I say this? Like, okay, I guess I'll reference to another internet philosopher real quickly. Stefan Molyneux has always said things about different things about the market and human interaction. And while I was watching this documentary, and even as while you were going in there, I can't help but get the feeling that you're coming much more from a left perspective, not very in favor of the market per se. I mean, I see all these problems in the world, but at the same time, I don't always see the market as the root cause of it. Like, take the environment for example. I think it's a great idea to help the environment, to help this natural world around us, but I don't think that using the state is really the best option. I think that there are plenty of alternatives that could be used in the market to preserve nature. So what I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what is your take on the market? Because sorry if I'm stumbling a little bit here, but because the way I look at it is the market is the most natural thing that exists within human nature. Human beings exchanging peacefully and voluntarily.
Well, I certainly think voluntary relations are natural for human beings. Before the advent of political power and civilization 6,000 years ago, that's how we survived for 250,000 years in communities that weren't organized around armed central authority, where people lived according to tradition and kinship and weren't forced into their roles with a small privileged sector benefiting from it. As to the market, and left or right, let me make a couple points. One is that exchange is not the only way a community can cooperate. There's also sharing. And that was done until 6,000 years ago, and still done in so-called primitive, in more more tribal and native communities. There's other ways to interact them through exchange. Exchange means tit for tat. And sharing and cultivating a common good is the proven way that humanity survived for 250,000 years. As for the market, I think it's important to distinguish between exchange by big businesses that are chartered under the state. What makes a corporation is a certain legal step under political power that gives it certain privileges and prerogatives. I don't believe that purely free exchange among people without the state's intervention in giving corporations prerogatives would have allowed so much destruction of the habitat. I believe there would have been natural countermeasures against it, countermeasures that would have prevented that destruction. But the companies have those prerogatives. They can build a coal-fired power plant where they please and pump their gases and heat contamination out into the environment. They can buy and take total control over huge regions of rainforest, wipe it out, and set it up for cattle grazing. This would not be possible if people in each of those regions were in control of their own land and their own resources. It's only the state that gives financial interests that extraordinary power to have an impact on places that the people living there wouldn't have permitted. So the market, I think, is often confused with what big business does under what is basically a kind of state capitalism, where the legal institutions are all designed in favor of those with tremendous concentrated economic power and influence, and they can do things that private individuals could never do. Does that make any sense?
Yes, I would actually agree with that. This sort of state-based corporate capitalism is really, people seem to conflate that with what I would consider just a regular free market of people exchanging. And I would definitely agree with you on sharing to an extent. I think it has its limits per se, because let's face it, you can't always share everything, and at the same time, when you want to try and do something like, say, barter, sometimes you don't have something you could always barter with. That's why I've always personally viewed things like currencies, and I'm not saying like the US dollar, I'm saying like outside currencies like Bitcoin or silver. I've always viewed those as a good way to facilitate the means of an exchange per se. But I find it funny that you use the word capitalism, because this is such it's a word that's really been a dividing point for several people, several schools of thought, and even some of my coworkers here on VVN I've had the capitalist debate over, and I have to be honest, the way I've come to view the term is very similar to the word feminism, in the sense that there are some that have taken it and made it into something it's not, something of crony, something very crony. Meanwhile, there's also still that very legitimate side to capitalism that isn't bad. Now, I do understand that the state has really made capitalism into something it's not, but in essence, it really is just human beings acting voluntarily and peacefully free of coercion.
Well, I wouldn't want to argue about the terminology. It's a name. Capitalism is a name. Marx meant something very specific by it, and that's where the word really came into wide use, was in the discussion that the communists and socialists raised a couple hundred years ago. For them, capitalism meant a system of power in which power resided in the hands of those with capital. And capital meant not just money, but things like owning factories and land. But it was the power that made it a system. It wasn't the process of exchange and production under their control that made it something that they disliked. It was the power that resided in the hands of those who had that concentrated wealth and ownership. Like I say, I don't want to get bogged down in a debate about words. Exchange, markets that arise when people create, produce, distribute, and exchange things is one thing. An economic system enforced from a powerful center that favors those who have great wealth and own great quantities of property and land and control the means of production is another. Call them whatever you like. I'm totally against the latter. Former is one of the many ways that I think people can and should naturally live and be free to live.
Understood. I simply asked because I had one person in particular who wanted me to ask about this after watching your documentary. But to move on, Um, History really is a revolving door of domination, and well, recent history, I should say. But I guess my main question is, how would you shut down this machine of domination? How would you recommend, like, to bring it to a halt?
I wouldn't recommend bringing it to a halt because I think that would cause billions of deaths. It's become our life support system.
So you think it has to be something that's like phased out over time, slowly?
I don't see any alternative, but I my expertise is in the theory that I've created for explaining how this mechanism, the engine, works. As to recommending what people should do about it or foreseeing what may be done about it in the future, I pretty much draw a blank for several reasons. There's never been a global system of power like this. There's never been such a powerful and unified system of power to challenge. And it's pretty much immune to some of the traditional challenges, certainly military overthrow. As apart from the horrible bloodshed and suffering that it would cause to challenge the United States militarily, it's futile. There's absolutely no way to do it. Previous revolutions, you could, when militaries were much smaller and so forth. Politics, there have probably been places where political force could topple specific regimes. I'm not sure that's possible the way the modern United States system, for example, is set up. And beyond that, domination, as I understand it, is now a worldwide phenomenon. You could challenge one regime, reform it, maybe even bring it down, but that would leave most of the rest of the apparatus running around the world. So what I am sure of is that we must take immediate, urgent action to prevent the two worst aspects of the human emergency from coming true, and that's nuclear war and the way the habitat's being destroyed. If that destruction of the habitat continues at the rate today, the world will be a horrible place in another generation or two. There's no question about it. It has to be arrested. The only thing that can cause that to happen is direct political action. Same thing with nuclear war. The United States has been militarizing outer space for a couple of decades now, and it started planning to when I was a boy. That's very dangerous because once you've got weapons in space that can neutralize, like nuclear missiles being fired from across the planet, that makes you able to launch aggressive nuclear wars without being retaliated against. The threat of nuclear war is enormous and immediate. So nuclear disarmament and protecting the habitat, to me, are the most urgent political goals, and those have to be done within the existing system. Farther down the road, I think progressive reforms can do a lot to neutralize how this engine works and bring things more under people's control and take it out of the hands of the exclusive elites that control it now. I want to say one more thing. What's going to finally happen in the future is something no one can foresee. Things are getting worse and worse for many people all over the world. People are going to take creative and brilliant actions on the spur of the moment, driven by sufferings that afflict them, their communities, in ways that are totally beyond any prediction. Those in power will respond in ways that are probably beyond prediction. It's going to be a great drama. I'm optimistic because I believe in human beings, and I believe that when they really get together and organize and fight for what they believe is right and for what is good, they can accomplish amazing things. But I can't say anything about how to shut the engine down in particular. That I'm not smart enough to figure that out, and I'm not in the position, under the circumstances, that will drive people to do what's finally necessary to do it.
Understood, and it's um, I always, you say nuclear war and the environment are both big issues, and I won't say that they aren't, because they most definitely are, but there have always been like three ones that I mostly have identified as the larger issues, kind of as though those two are somewhat sub-issues within these ones, and this sort of continuous war that we have going on, this corrupt political system and the Federal Reserve System that it has spawned, and this domestic war on the people, I think that those are really the three big things. And I would agree with you. It's hard to kind of think of a solution to such a massive problem. And that goes back to your thing in the documentary with Socrates and Hypatia, to work wonders that even the oracle cannot oversee. And you know, it's really weird to see how the heart of domination has come to the domestication of the species. And you know, I'm sort of reaching the end of my time here, and I really would like to have you on another time, because you caught me at like right when I'm still like doing everything on the show to really kind of bring it up and kind of make it better here on the network. But I had one final question that I thought I would bring up, and it's not so much a question as it is a debate that has sort of existed amongst anarchists since the beginning of anarchism, that I've learned when I really look into the history and the background of anarchy. And today, the debate's been kind of framed as something of anarcho-communist versus anarcho-capitalist, but I don't really like using those words to define either side, because to do that, I think, would be to kind of imply that that you're trying to make a system of something like communism or capitalism existed with the state sound better, basically, make it more appealing. And it's always kind of been, it really, when you look into the root of it, it's always kind of been social anarchism versus individualist anarchism. And I want to know, what is your take on this debate that has sort of, in a way, has always been a great dividing point for many anarchists, and I personally think has always been a point that has done good at dividing us and keeping the state in power?
That's a tremendously important point. Divide and conquer. Divide and rule. As long as we're arguing with each other about some vision of utopia that lies beyond a process of political upheaval that we can't imagine, I think we're wasting our time. We should all be able to agree as anarchists on anarchos means without rulers, that people can live without rulers, naturally live without rulers, and would much better without rulers. I don't see anarchism as a utopian vision at all. I see it as a standard of human relations, and it's up to the people of the world, not their anarchist thinkers, to decide what ways of life suit them best. We just simply ought to be fighting for them to have the freedom to do so.
I would very much so agree with that, and I think that's probably the best way of looking at it. It's amazing how people have sort of taken these thinkers and have kind of put them above themselves as if they were somewhat of a pseudo-ruler. But anyways, Mark, I'm now reaching the end of my time, but it has been really, really good having you on here. And if you ever want to try and get on any of the other shows here on VVN, I could always try and talk to people and see if I can make that happen. Anything else you want to say closing out?
First, I'd be very happy to speak to anyone there anytime. I just want to say that the documentary is available on the Lifting Veils channel at YouTube, or you can simply Google Mark Korske's Engines of Domination and find it. It will also soon be available in torrent from Peace News Now. And I really hope people will check, even if you disagree with me and think I'm a lefty. It's a beautiful piece of cinematic work and some interesting ideas to think about, 1 hour long, and I don't think you'd be sorry you watched.
Yeah, exactly. It's a very good one. And even if there's any of my more capitalist viewers out there who I know who are majoring in economics, I highly recommend this. I mean, you know, it was weird. I don't like to use these words, but I kind of started off more as a social anarchist and worked my way over to the more market anarchism. But even then, going back and watching this again, it just goes to show you that there are truths to be found in all of these philosophies. There's no one right idea of it, I guess you could say. There's no one right idea of anarchy. They all have something to bring to the table. All right, so I'm just going to close this out. So if you want to get some good art, go check out Distance Arts, help this podcast get somewhere. If you want to read a little bit more, wait for the Pontiac Tribune's new website to come up. And if you need to get if you want to donate to a good small company that's looking to block the NSA and the various corporations from taking your private information, go check out Win Privacy. The Indiegogo should be up soon. And I hope all of you have a good day. This is Mitchell Wiechek of the Adorkable Anarchist World, pertaining to realism in the age of imperialism.